January 13th, 1952, Donner Pass, California. The wind is screaming across the Sierra Nevada at nearly 80 miles per hour, carrying snow from the mountainside and blasting it sideways through the darkness. Visibility is almost nothing. Somewhere high on the summit line, a train has stopped. Not slowed, not delayed, stopped. The city of San Francisco, one of the most famous passenger trains in America, sits trapped on the mountain with 227 passengers aboard. Families, travelers, railroad workers. Outside the windows, the snow keeps piling higher, minute by minute, burying the tracks beneath drifts so heavy they look more like frozen waves than snowfall. Above the line, the slopes of Donner Pass are groaning under the weight of a storm that railroad veterans will later call one of the worst in California history. Avalanches have already begun. Rescue crews know something immediately. If the railroad cannot reopen the track, those passengers will be stranded on a frozen mountain with no road access and temperatures dropping every hour. So the railroad sends its last weapon, a machine most people never see, a machine designed for exactly this moment. 100 tons of steel and steam, a spinning wheel of blades, a machine crews call the War Wagon, the rotary snowplow. For more than 60 years, these machines have fought the same enemy, snow that falls not in inches, but in walls, avalanches that bury locomotives whole, storms powerful enough to stop the commerce of an entire continent. And every winter, men climb aboard those machines knowing exactly what the job might cost them. On that January night in 1952, 3 rotaries are already fighting their way toward the trapped train. One disappears under an avalanche, another becomes buried in a drift before it can reach the summit. Only one keeps moving forward through the blizzard, half a mile per hour, chewing, grinding, throwing snow high into the night air. Somewhere beside that machine stands a railroad engineer named Raymond Holland. 30 seconds later, he will be dead. But every passenger on that stranded train will survive. Every single one. Which raises a question that echoes through the history of the railroad. Why does Raymond Holland matter so much to this story? Because the machine he was trying to save was not just another railroad tool. It was the difference between a railroad that survived winter and one that didn't survive at all. Without it, the transcontinental railroad across the Sierra Nevada would close every year. Mail would stop, freight would stop, the American West would stall under snow. This is the story of the rotary snowplow, where it came from, who built it, what it demanded of the men who ran it, and what the mountain took in return. But to understand why the railroad needed such a machine, we have to go back much further, back to a time when winter on the railroad was not an inconvenience, it was a disaster waiting to happen. In the late 19th century, railroads were spreading across North America like steel veins across a continent. Tracks stretched across the prairies, over deserts, and deep into the mountains. The railroads promised something extraordinary: year-round transportation, commerce that never stopped, a nation connected coast to coast. But there was one problem: winter. Across the northern United States and Canada, winter didn't just slow railroads, it crushed them. Storms buried tracks beneath drifts 15 and 20 feet deep. Locomotives slammed into frozen walls of snow and stopped instantly. Entire rail lines vanished beneath mountains of ice. The technology railroads had to fight this problem was primitive. They used something called a wedge plow, a giant triangular blade mounted to the front of a locomotive. The locomotive would charge forward and shove snow aside. Against light snowfall, it worked. Against serious drifts, it failed completely. Because pushing snow compresses it, and compressed snow behaves like something else entirely: concrete. When wedge plows hit serious drifts, they packed the snow into solid blocks. Crews had to finish the job the only way they could, with shovels. Thousands of laborers were hired every winter to dig railroads out by hand. Men worked in blizzards that froze their clothes solid. Avalanches buried entire crews. Sometimes men simply disappeared into storms and were never seen again. The railroad companies rarely recorded those deaths publicly, but everyone in the industry understood the truth. Winter was winning. By the 1860s, engineers began asking a new question. Could a machine exist that didn't push snow, but destroyed it? The first man to seriously imagine such a machine was not a railroad engineer at all. He was a dentist. His name was Dr. J.W. Eliot of Toronto. During the day, he repaired teeth, but in the evenings, Eliot filled notebooks with mechanical sketches. He could not stop thinking about the railroad's snow problem. One idea kept returning to him. What if instead of pushing snow aside, a machine attacked it directly? Imagine a giant spinning wheel mounted to the front of a rail car. Line that wheel with blades, spin it fast enough, drive it into a snowdrift, and the blades would slice the snow apart. Instead of piling beside the tracks, the snow could be thrown far away from the railway entirely. It was a simple concept, brutally simple. In 1869, Eliot patented his idea. He spent years trying to convince railroad companies to build it. No one believed it would work. The forces would be too great, the blades would jam, the machine would destroy itself. So Eliot's invention sat unused for 15 years. Meanwhile, the railroads kept fighting winter the same way they always had: men, shovels, and casualties. Then, Eliot's patent landed in the hands of a machinist named Orange Joe, and everything changed.
Joel was not a dreamer. He was a practical mechanic from Ontario, a man who spent his life fixing broken machines. When he studied Eliot's patent, he immediately saw two things. The idea was brilliant. The design was impossible. The blade geometry wouldn't throw snow clear. The power system wouldn't survive the load. If someone tried to build the machine exactly as Eliot imagined it, it would fail instantly. But Joe believed the concept could work, if it was redesigned. So he spent 7 years rebuilding the machine from scratch. He engineered curved deflector chambers to throw snow away from the track. He designed a system of heavy blades that would cut rather than pack snow. He created a gear system that could transmit enormous power to a rotating wheel. Before building the real machine, Joe tested prototypes in sand dunes, forcing the blades to chew through resistance again and again until the design held. Finally, in 1884, the first true rotary snowplow was built in Toronto by John and Edward Leslie. Railroad men gathered to watch the test. The machine rolled forward. The blades struck the drift. Instead of packing the snow, the rotary did something no plow had ever done before. It threw the snow 20 feet into the air. The track behind the machine was clean. The crowd of railroad engineers fell silent. They understood immediately what they were looking at. Not a tool, a revolution. Soon, railroads across North America were ordering the machines, but nowhere would they become more important than a place that had already become infamous in American history: Donner Pass. The name alone carried a grim reputation. In 1846, the Donner Party had become trapped there in winter while crossing the Sierra Nevada. Many of them died in the snow. Decades later, the Central Pacific Railroad drove tracks across the same pass, climbing to more than 7,000 feet above sea level. The engineers who built that line already knew what the mountain could do. Sierra storms carried enormous moisture from the Pacific Ocean. When that moisture froze at high altitude, it produced snow unlike anything found elsewhere in North America. Railroad workers called it Sierra cement. It was wet, heavy, dense, sometimes 40% water by weight. When it piled up 20 feet deep, it hardened like frozen concrete. Before the rotary plow, the railroad could lose entire weeks digging that snow away. The first rotary arrived on Donner Pass in 1887. That winter, storms buried the line under drifts that stopped every wedge plow the railroad owned. Then they sent in the rotary. The machine advanced slowly, half a mile per hour. The spinning wheel struck the drift. Snow exploded into the air. Wall after wall of hardened snow disappeared. Railroad workers watching from the trackside realized something extraordinary. For the first time, the mountain was losing. But victory came at a cost. The rotary snowplow was one of the most complex and dangerous machines ever placed on a railroad. Inside its steel body were 3 steam engines producing nearly 600 horsepower. Their only purpose was to spin the massive blade wheel on the front of the machine. Locomotives behind the plow pushed it forward, sometimes 4 or 5 engines at once. The rotary could not move itself. It only fought snow. Operating it required an entire crew. Engineers, firemen feeding coal into the boilers, mechanics watching the gear systems, and at the very front of the machine, the spotting crew. The spotting crew had the worst job. They stood at the edges of the plow in blizzard conditions, trying to see obstacles before the blades hit them: a buried rock, a broken rail switch, a fallen tree. If something solid struck the blade wheel at full speed, it could shatter steel and send lethal fragments flying. Inside the plow, the heat from the boilers was intense. Outside, the temperature could be below 0. Firemen shoveled coal every few minutes to keep steam pressure high enough to spin the blades. The noise was overwhelming. Gears grinding, steam roaring, steel screaming against packed snow. Men sometimes left their shifts half-deaf. But the machines worked. For decades, they kept the line across Daughter Pass open through winters that would have shut it down completely. The railroad kept its promise. The line stayed open. The mountain did not win. Until 1952. That winter, storms buried the Sierra Nevada deeper than anyone had seen in decades. Avalanches struck the line again and again. On January 13, the passenger train, City of San Francisco, became trapped by a snowslide east of Yuba Gap. 227 people were stranded on the mountain. The railroad launched a massive rescue effort. Rotary plows attacked the drifts from both directions. One rotary was trapped by an avalanche before reaching the train. Another became buried while clearing the line. Only one continued working. During the rescue effort, a slope above the track collapsed. The avalanche struck without warning. Engineer Raymond Holland was outside the plow attempting to restore the machine to operation. The snow buried him in seconds. He was the only person who died during the entire disaster. 3 days later, the passengers of the City of San Francisco were evacuated safely. 227 lives saved, 1 man lost. After the disaster, the railroad changed its procedures. Rotary plows would now operate in pairs, one facing forward and one backward, so if an avalanche buried the line behind them, they could cut their own way out. The machines continued working on Donner Pass for decades. Even today, modern railroads still keep rotary plows in reserve for the worst storms. Because sometimes the snow still wins. And when that happens, the war wagons return. The rotary snowplow changed more than railroad operations. It changed the economics of an entire region. By keeping rail lines open through winter, the machine allowed year-round trade across the American West. Farms, cities, and industries depended on those tracks remaining open no matter what storms arrived. A dentist imagined the idea. A machinist perfected it. Thousands of railroad workers risked their lives to operate it. And when the storms came, those machines went to war with the mountain. Was it worth it? The answer isn't simple, but the math tells part of the story. 1 life lost, 227 saved, and more than 60 years of uninterrupted commerce across one of the most dangerous mountain passes in North America. The rotary snowplow didn't defeat winter, but it proved something remarkable about human ambition. Even when nature builds walls of ice and snow 20 feet high, people will build machines to cut straight through them, and they will send those machines into the storm, again and again, and again.